Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Ever get frustrated by a door you just can't figure out how to open?
Well, like,
Or maybe a stovetop where the controls seem totally backwards?
you are not alone.
Definitely not. And that's what we're diving into today, the fascinating world of design.
And it's not just about fancy aesthetics.
Right, not just the looks.
It's really about how the things we interact with every single day.
All this stuff around us.
Yeah, how are they structured to work with our brains?
Or not work, let's be honest.
Or not work.
Sometimes it really feels that way.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is we often blame ourselves when these everyday objects, kind of stump us.
Totally, like I'm the dumb one.
Right, but Don Norman, he's like the design guru
Okay,
behind the design of everyday things.
that's the book we're looking at, right?
Yes, exactly. He argues that more often than not, it's the design, not the user, that's at fault.
So Don Norman is like the authority on this stuff, like the main guy.
Absolutely, yeah. His book is considered like the Bible for this, for understanding why some things are just a joy to use.
Makes you happy to use them.
And others make you want to, tear your hair out.
I've been there. Okay, so it's not just about making things look cool. It's got to work, too. Speaking of things working, I was reading about Norman wanting designers to, follow people, get this, even into the shower.
What? That's dedication.
It sounds extreme, but his point is all about observing people in their natural environment.
Okay.
You can't design something effectively if you don't get the context. You don't understand the context in which it's going to be used. Right, like a shower is maybe the last place you'd expect good design. So if it works there,
Exactly.
it's got to work everywhere.
Exactly. And this idea of, really watching how people use things.
Observing.
Yes, observing.
Yeah.
That's crucial to Norman's core belief that what we call, human error
Then we mess up.
is often actually design error.
Okay, so when I leave the stove on because the indicator light is so tiny and blends in, that's the stove's fault, not mine.
Well, it might be a shared responsibility.
Okay.
But seriously, Norman uses the example, and it's kind of a chilling example, of the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident.
Wait, really?
Yes.
The control room design was that bad?
It was really bad. Yeah, the control panels were incredibly confusing.
Oh, no.
Just think, so many lights, so many alarms, and they're poorly laid out.
So you don't know what to look at first.
Exactly. And there's no clear indication of what is most important. So it made misinterpreting the situation almost inevitable.
That is terrifying. It makes you realize how much we rely on good design, even in those really, really high-stakes situations.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's where Norman's concepts of affordances and fugnifiers come in.
Okay.
Essentially, they're these cues that tell us how to use something.
Like instructions.
Kind of. Like a really good example is a door handle.
Okay.
The shape and the position, they kind of tell us to grab and pull. Right?
Unless it's one of those awful doors where you have to push H to open outward.
Spike.
Why do those even exist?
See, you instinctively get it.
It makes no sense.
Those doors are a perfect example of bad design. They violate our expectations.
100%.
And they create what Norman calls the gulf of execution. That gap between what we want to do and figuring out how to actually do it.
Oh, man. The gulf of execution. Haven't we all been stranded on that shore a time or two?
More like shipwrecked.
Yeah.
And then there's the gulf of evaluation. Did the thing we just do,
Yeah.
did it actually work?
Right. Is the door open?
Exactly.
Did I turn on the right burner?
Good design bridges both of those gulfs.
This is making me look at everything around me differently. Like my coffee maker.
Yeah.
Why are there so many buttons? I just want coffee.
Right. That taps into Norman's idea of these mental models. Right. We all have them. These mental shortcuts in our brain for how things should work
Makes sense.
based on our experiences
Right.
and good design.
Yeah.
It aligns with those models. When it doesn't,
Then what happens?
we end up frustrated and confused every time.
Like with my refrigerator, I
Yeah.
swear I've read the manual. I've stared at those dials.
Yeah.
I still can't get the temperature right.
It's tough.
It's ridiculous.
You know what's funny about this? Norman admits in the book that he struggles with his own fridge controls.
Get out.
Yeah.
Really?
Even he, the design expert, struggles with it. It's kind of reassuring to know that even design experts, they're not immune to this.
They're human. But that makes me wonder, if our brains rely on these mental models, how much of what we need to know should be in our heads versus out in the world through, good design?
That is a great question.
Is it my fault for not remembering or the fridge's fault for being so unclear?
That gets to the heart of why design matters. Norman talks about this balance between knowledge in the head and knowledge in the world.
Okay.
And sometimes, yeah, we rely on memory,
Yeah.
but often it's really about those clear cues in our environment that good design provides.
Okay, so it's like I don't need to memorize the layout of my keyboard
Right.
because the letters are right there on the keys.
Precisely. Or think about this, the U.S. penny. Norman points out, most people, we can rarely pick it out of a lineup, right?
Really?
We're just looking at like images of coins.
Yeah.
But we use it perfectly fine in everyday life.
Why? Why is that?
We don't need to remember its exact design,
Oh,
just its general look and feel
okay.
compared to other coins. Context is key.
It's like our brains are good at filling in the gaps when the design gives us enough to work with.
And that's the beauty of it. Good design, it works seamlessly with our cognitive abilities.
Oh.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Technology can be a double-edged sword when it comes to all of this.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What's the paradox of technology? We're talking about good design.
Technology can both simplify and complicate our lives.
Okay.
It gives us amazing tools, incredible capabilities, but often at the cost of increased complexity, which then,
I think a trade-off.
yes,
Yeah.
which makes good design even harder to get right.
It's a tough job being a designer these days.
Yeah.
Like my smartphone.
Yeah. What about it?
I can do a million things with it, but I still haven't figured out half the features.
That's such a common experience.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And Norman highlights how the sheer power of modern devices,
All that they can do.
it can become a barrier to use. So it's a constant design challenge to make tech intuitive and accessible,
Right.
even as it gets more and more
Well,
sophisticated.
too complicated.
Exactly.
So how do designers tackle that? Is there some sort of secret sauce to making things, easy to use,
Yeah.
even if they're incredibly powerful?
Well, there's no magic formula,
Okay.
but Norman outlines some really key principles. One that really stands out, and it often throws people off, is the importance of constraints.
Constraints.
Yeah.
Like limitations.
Kind of, yeah.
Isn't the whole point of technology to give us more options, more freedom?
That's where it gets counterintuitive.
Okay.
But stick with me.
All right.
Constraints can actually be incredibly helpful.
Really?
Yeah, think about it like this. Okay, a well-designed set of guardrails on the road. Those don't restrict your driving route.
Oh.
They guide you safely along.
Yeah.
Constraints, when done well, they provide structure and they prevent us from, going off track.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's about guiding the user, not limiting them. How does this actually work, though? Like, in design?
Okay, so Norman uses this example of a redesigned battery that's physically impossible to insert incorrectly.
Oh, smart.
Right. It's a simple constraint,
Yeah,
but it eliminates a common error.
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Why isn't everything designed like that?
Well, it's not always that straightforward,
Right.
but the principle, it applies across all kinds of design.
Okay.
Think about, like, those drop-down menus on websites.
Yeah,
They constrain your choices
that's true.
to a manageable list.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to find what you need without getting overwhelmed.
Right, without just a sea of options.
Exactly. Good design often hides the complexity from us.
I like that. So constraints are like those helpful friends who keep you from making bad decisions by, making the right decision obvious.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of preventing bad decisions, Norman emphasizes designing for error,
Okay.
which ties into this beautifully.
Wait, designing for people to mess up, isn't that like accepting defeat?
It's not about encouraging mistakes, but it's about accepting that they're inevitable. We all make them good design. It anticipates those errors,
Okay.
and it tries to minimize the consequences.
So it's like a safety net.
Yes, exactly. Like those pop-up warnings that ask, are you sure you want to delete this file?
Yes, all the time.
Right. Or the undo feature in most software.
Oh, thank goodness for undo.
It's such a simple thing. But it gives us that safety net
Huge.
when we inevitably slip up. It acknowledges that we're human. And that's okay.
It is okay.
It's gonna happen.
That is so reassuring. I can't tell you how many times undo has saved me from disasters,
Yeah.
like a design guardian angel or something.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this brings us to Norman's broader point about the human-centered design process.
Yeah.
It's this iterative cycle of observation, idea generation, prototyping, and testing, all focused on understanding and meeting the needs of the people who will actually use the product.
So it's not just designers sitting in a room saying, let's make this look cool.
Not at all. It's about getting out into the world,
Okay.
observing people, understanding their challenges,
Yeah.
and then creating solutions that actually work for them in their daily lives.
Okay, but that's got to be easier said than done.
It can be tough.
How do you test designs before they're actually built? Like, how do you know?
Well, there are all sorts of really clever techniques. One that Norman describes is the Wizard of Oz prototyping method.
Wait, like the movie?
Yeah.
Is there a tiny man behind the curtain pulling levers?
Not quite.
Yeah.
But the idea is kind of similar.
Okay.
You create a simulation of a system,
Okay.
even if it's just a person pretending to be a complex computer program to see how users interact with it.
Oh, clever.
Yeah.
I read an example about this with an airline reservation system.
Yes.
Wasn't that in Norman's book?
That's right. He talks about how a research team used this Wizard of Oz method to test a new reservation system.
Okay.
People thought they were interacting with a sophisticated computer program.
Right.
It was actually a grad student in another room responding to their requests.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is so ingenious.
It's clever.
So they could learn how people actually use the system
Yes.
before they even wrote a single line of code.
Exactly. And they discovered all sorts of things that they hadn't anticipated, like the way people phrased their requests,
Interesting.
the kind of language they used.
Right, because people talk differently.
Exactly. And the problems they were actually trying to solve. It highlighted that real-world testing. So important.
So it's about talking to real people, figuring out how they're going to use this thing.
It all goes back to that.
It makes you realize you can't just, theorize about good design. You have to test it out in the wild.
You got to get it out there.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, the core message of Norman's work.
What's up?
It's about putting people at the center of design, understanding their needs, their limitations, and their aspirations, and then creating solutions that truly make their lives better.
Not just look cool.
Right, not just look cool, but actually improve things.
Yeah, make things better.
Yeah.
Make things easier.
Exactly.
It's funny. We've been talking about smartphones and software and all this tech.
Yeah.
But what I love about Norman's book is how he uses all these everyday objects
He really does.
as examples.
It's the simple stuff.
Doors, faucets,
Yeah,
salt, and pepper shakers.
you bet.
It makes the point that good design or bad design,
Right.
it's everywhere.
It is totally universal.
If you just start to pay attention.
You start to see it everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes, honestly, it's those really simple objects that are the most frustrating.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Norman actually has a whole section, it's great, on the problem with doors.
Okay.
And it's something we can all relate to, I think.
Tell me about it. I have been in so many situations where I'm like wrestling with the door,
Yeah, like fighting it.
feeling like such an idiot.
Right.
What is that? Is it me? Am I not using my brain?
It's so rarely about intelligence, it's almost always the design. Norman points out a well-designed door, it should clearly signal how it's supposed to open, just by looking at it.
Okay.
The handle, the hinges, the way it's mounted.
Right.
All of these should give you those immediate, almost subconscious clues
Interesting.
about whether to push or pull, slide or swing.
Yeah.
But so often those cues are misleading or just absent.
They're just not there.
It's true, yeah.
It's like those doors with handles on both sides.
Oh, the worst.
Am I supposed to push or pull?
The classic example of conflicting cues.
Yeah.
Our brains are primed to associate a handle with pulling,
Right.
but then the design throws this curveball at us.
Makes no sense.
Right, and then there are those infuriating doors that open outward, but you have to push inward to release the latch.
Oh, those are the worst. Why would anyone design a door like that? It's like some kind of cruel trick.
It's so mean.
It really is.
It often comes down to this, and it's unfortunate, but aesthetics trumping usability.
Really?
Yeah, designers prioritize a sleek, minimalist look,
Right.
even if it makes the door harder to use.
Form over function. It's the classic design trap, no matter what you're designing. Right.
It really is. And it all circles back to Norman's core message, this idea of really thinking about how people will actually interact with something.
Okay.
Aesthetics, they're important,
Sure.
but they shouldn't come at the expense of functionality.
So how do we, as users, even if we're not, designers ourselves,
Right.
start to avoid these design pitfalls?
That's the question.
What can we learn from Norman to make our lives a little less frustrating? One door handle at a time.
It's the little things, right. Well, one key takeaway is just to notice, right? Pay attention.
Okay.
Even those seemingly insignificant details. Notice those cues that objects give you.
Okay. The affordances.
The affordances, the signifiers we talked about.
Yeah.
Think about how those elements, they kind of guide your actions, even subconsciously.
Right.
And they help you understand how something works.
So just start paying more attention
Yeah. Just
to how things are designed.
once you start to do that, you'll be amazed or maybe horrified at how much thought or lack of thought goes into even the simplest objects.
It's like becoming a design detective in our own lives, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And the more we all do this, I think, the more we can start to demand better design in everything around us.
We can be advocates
Yes.
for good design just in our everyday lives.
You got it. We vote with our wallets.
That's right.
We choose the products that prioritize usability.
Yeah. And hey, maybe we speak up when things are poorly designed. Politely, of course.
Always politely.
Yeah.
Let people know. Let those designers know.
It makes a difference.
It all makes a difference. And maybe, just maybe, we can all contribute to this world where doors are less confusing, appliances actually make sense, and technology helps us instead of making things more complicated.
It's the dream.
Wouldn't that be something?
It really would. Well, I feel like my brain has officially expanded, and I'm looking at the world in a whole new light. So thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. It's always great to chat about this stuff. And hopefully our listeners out there will walk away with that fresh perspective.
Yes.
And maybe even a little more patience for those poorly designed doors out there.
A little more patience. We could all use that. And listeners, we want to hear from you. What's one object in your everyday life that you find particularly well or poorly designed?
Let us know.
Share your experiences, your frustrations, your design triumphs. We want to hear all about it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.